We're on DAF Yudam and Aleph, and the Gemara has this issue of apparently there seems to be some conflict, because when it comes to the case of Kisoy Hadam, Beis Shammai is more permissive when it comes to Simchas Yantiv. He says, listen, Simchas Yantiv is a prevailing factor, and therefore you have to be lenient when it comes to laws of muktzah and other issues. Beis Hillel seems to be more machmir. They say that you can't even shecht unless you have afer muchen mi ba'od yom. And yet we see a few conflicting brises. So which brise are we up to? Are we up to Ur Minhi?
Where are we? For the shadows, just finished the...
Six wide lines now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Inami. So actually, we're coming into this in the middle. So the case that is being discussed here is the brisa that talks about a hide. You have an animal that you've shechted. Let's say you shechted a sheep, and you don't want to lose the valuable asset of its pelt, and so you want to be able to place the pelt down on the floor, which requires so that people will trample on it, and that will help process it and preserve it until after Yantif, when you can do the full processing. The problem is that its pelt is muktzah on Yantif. So Beis Shammai say that you can only handle this pelt if there's a kazayas of basar attached to it. Beis Hillel say no. Beis Hillel say that even if there's no kazayas of basar attached to it, you can just lay it down on the floor. So the Gemara says, you see from here that Beis Shammai is l'chumra when it comes to Simchas Yantif, and Beis Hillel is l'chumra, l'kula rather, and that's just the opposite of the case of Kisei Hadam. So Rabbi Yochanan muchlefes ashita. So Rabbi Yochanan therefore concludes that the brisa which talks about the pelt must have the opinions reversed. Really, Beis Hillel is l'chumra and Beis Shammai is l'kula. Frek the Gemara mimai dilma lohi. Not necessarily so. Ad kan lo kamri Beis Shammai hasam elahecha diika deker notes. Aval hecha deleka deker notes lo. You see, the whole principle as to why the Gemara is arguing that Beis Shammai is mekel when it comes to Kisei Hadam is that you've done some activity before Yantif of inserting the shovel in the ground to demonstrate that you've done a preparatory act before Yantif. Here, when it comes to the pelt, you haven't done any preparatory act before Yantif, so maybe Beis Shammai is only mekel when you've done the preparatory act of the deker notes, but not in the case of the pelt. So that's not a contradiction. Inami ad kan lo kamri Beis Hillel hacha ela dechazi lemizge luya val hasam lo. And furthermore, Beis Hillel is not in conflict either. Maybe the reason why Beis Hillel is lenient when it comes to the pelt is because even a raw pelt, he can put it on the ground and use it as a rug to sit on. But when it comes to earth is considered to be totally muktzah. It's not a kli, it can't be used for anything. And therefore Beis Hillel is not in conflict either, because there are conceptual differences which would cause Beis Shammai to be machmir over here and Beis Hillel to be mekel over here, and just the opposite in the other case. So Elai kasha hakasha. So the Gemara says, you're right. If there's a contradiction, it's from here. Beis Shammai omrim ein mesalkin es atrisin biyom tov, uBeis Hillel matirin af lahachzir. Now let's just talk about what's going on over here. First thing we need to realize is that it is permitted to purchase items from a merchant on Yantif, provided that there's no exchange of money. What you can do is, for Simchas Yantif, you're allowed to go to a merchant that knows you and say, Rabbi, I need a couple of spoons, or Rabbi, I need a pound of meat, and we'll settle after Yantif. And the guy will give you whatever you need, right? And he'll settle with you after Yantif. That's perfectly permitted on Yantif. For Yantif only because of Simchas Yantif. We want you to have proper provisions for Yantif. So comes along Beis Shammai, and they talk about a certain kind of itinerant peddler who would carry his wares in a box, and then when he would come to the shuk, he would set up shop, open up his box, use the lid of the box as the showcase, and put samples on the lid, and then the merchandise would be inside his box. Beis Shammai say that the removal of the lid, because it's very forcefully embedded within the box, it constitutes an act of deconstruction if you pull the lid off the box on Shabbos or Yantiv, and putting the lid back also constitutes an act of construction, and therefore Beis Shammai tell you that you're not allowed to remove the lid off of this box on Yantiv, even if it's for the purpose of giving someone merchandise for Yantiv. Beis Hillel matir and af lahachzir, and Beis Hillel say not only can you remove the lid, but you can even put the lid back on once you've conducted your business. So Alma Gabi Simchas Yantif Beishamai Lechomra Beisil Lekula. So we see that when it comes to Simchas Yantif, Beishamai is very stringent and Beisil is very lenient. Just the opposite, or mini Hashochid Chayva of Beyom Bechule. This is just the opposite of the case of Kisei Adam, where Beishamai is liberal and Beisil is Machmir. So Bishlam Beishamai Lo Kasha Dika Deker No Tzachaleka Deker No. So we can answer Beishamai, say it's no contradiction, because once again, Beishamai perhaps is only liberal in a case where you've done a preparatory act of sticking the shovel in from before Yontif. Here, there was no preparatory act with this box from before Yontif, and that's why Beishamai is more machmir. Ela Beisil kasha, but according to but for Beisil it's a kasha, right? Why is Beisil machmir by Kisei Hadam and Mekel by the lid? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Muchlefes Ashita. So the Gemara wants to suggest, so this is where Rabbi Yochanan said you have to switch the opinions. But the Gemara says, no, that's not necessarily so. Dil Malohi, perhaps that's not true. Ad kan lo kamri beisil hacha ela mishum de'in binyan bekelim v'instira bekelim aval hasam lo. And maybe the reason why Beisil is liberal over here, but the box, is because what violation of Yantif is going on over here? The only thing that you can talk about is an act of boina, right? But bona is not true when it comes to Kalim. Beisil will say the only time there's bona is when something is attached to real estate. When it comes to digging a hole by doing Kisei Hadam, so therefore there's a semblance to bona over there, and that's why we're machmir. But over here, when it comes to removing or replacing the lid, since it's a kli, something that's movable, there's no bona involved, there's no construction involved, and therefore they're perfectly makel. So therefore, the Gemara concludes, we don't really have to say like Rabbi Yochanan says in any of these brises of Muchlefes Ashita. That's the conclusion of that sugi. We go on to the next Mishnah. Beishamai omrim lo yitol ela imkei ni anei ami ba'od yom, u'beisil omrim omed va'omer zeva ze ani notel. So we have a machlokus between Beishamai and Beisilel regarding our doves or our pigeons. Remember, we got this dove coop, and I want to be able to take birds and I want to shech them on Yantif and I want to eat them on Yantif. It's very common in the medieval and ancient world to eat squab. It was part of a regular staple of food. You ate squab, you took a pigeon, you shechted it, and you cleaned it up, and then you ate it. You cooked it and you ate it. So here's a guy who has a dove coop in his backyard, and Beishamai say that you need to actually prepare the birds from before Yantif. But how do you prepare them? You actually have to physically lift them up, whichever birds. Let's say I want to have 2 birds on Yantif. I actually have to physically lift them up in order to be meichen them, in order to prepare them for Yantif. I can't just designate them. Beisil will say a verbal designation. I'm going to use that white bird over there, and I'm going to use that bird that has a spot on its left wing, right? Those are the 2 birds. That's enough for Beisil. So that's the machlokes between Beishamai and Beisil. Amar of Chanan bar Ami machlokes bebrecha rishona. The Beishamai savri gazrin dilna asim luche. Beisil savri lo gazrinan. Aval bebrecha shnia divrei akol ba'omed va'omer zevazani noitel sagya. So this you need to know ornithology, which I don't. But Rashi gives us the background information. A brecha is a pair of birds that are born every month by pigeons or doves. I guess they lay a series of eggs, and I guess a male and a female typically hatch from these eggs that are laid, and it's done on a monthly basis, except during the winter season. During the winter, the pigeons desist from laying eggs, and in the spring they resume. The first male and female that are born in the spring are called the brecha rishona. They're called the first pair. And there's a special affinity that the mother has for this first pair of birds. She's chirping more, she's happier, and there's a fear that if you don't actually pick them up, says Beis Shammai, that you might have a sentimental feeling towards your bird. You may have some rachmanis for your bird, the mother bird, like Shiluach HaKain, right? You may have rachmanis for the mother bird, and you're not going to take her first pair of birds of the season. That's what's called the Brecha Rishona. And therefore, Beis Shammai say, unless you're prepared to pick up the birds and commit yourself to shechting them, we're worried that you may end up changing your mind, and therefore, and then you're going to pick them up and and then it's going to be tiltul shalol l'tzarech. It's going to be handling the birds for no reason, because you're not going to end up shechting it. But when you commit yourself by picking them up, then you've shown you've overcome any kind of sentimentality towards the bird, and you've committed yourself, and you will go ahead and shecht it.
Before Yontif, right?
You have to pick it up before Yontif. If you didn't pick it up before Yontif, we're worried that you may pick them up, take them over to shecht them, and then say at the last minute, Rachmanis for the mother bird. Okay, but if it's the Breicha Shni, it's already past the first pair of birds of the season, so then even Beis Shammai agree that verbal designation is sufficient. There's no Rachmanis attachment that you're going to have special Rachmanis for these pair of birds. So now the Gemara asks a question: the Gemara asks a question now on Beis Hillel. Why is it necessary for Beis Hillel to require you to specifically designate that white bird and that bird with the spot on its left tail? Why can't you just say, you know what, I'm going to need 2 birds tomorrow, and whichever 2 birds I take, I'll take. I got 20 birds in the coop, I'll take 2 out of the 20. Well, for that to work, you need to hold of the concept of breira, of retroactivity, which means that when you pick up the 2 birds, it turns out that limafreya, retroactively, those were the 2 birds that you had designated from before Yantif. Maybe Beis Hillel doesn't hold of the concept of breira. We've been going back and forth throughout Shas on the principle of breira. Maybe Beis Hillel doesn't hold of breira. V'hatznan, but you can't say that, because look at the following Mishnah. Hameis babayis v'lo psachim harbe kulan tameim. Niftach echad mehem hu tamei v'kulan tahorim. Now, in order to understand this sugya, we know that when there's a corpse inside a room, then all the kalim inside that room are tamei, right? That's clear. What if you have a doorway, and under the door frame of the doorway, which is not part of the actual room, but it's a separate door frame that protrudes outside of the structure, let's say you have kalim, you have utensils underneath that door frame. So technically you could argue that the utensils are not rendered tummy because of the corpse, because they're not in the same ohel. And yet that's not how we paskin. We paskin, there's a principle called sof tumalatzes, that if there's an eventuality that the corpse will have to traverse that corridor in order to leave the building, then anything that is along the trajectory of that corpse's path will also be considered to be tamei and is in the pathway of the corpse. This has very important ramifications for Kohanim afilu bizman hazeh, because if you create, let's say, a partition between a Kohen and a mace, let's say you have a doorway that blocks the Kohen and the mace, right? So technically there's no tumah that's being transferred from one room to the other. However, what if the mace, the only way for the mace to get out of the building is to go through the door that is creating the partition between the Kohen and the mace? So therefore it's called sof tumalatses. The corpse will eventually come into where I'm standing. Then right now we consider it as if the tumah is in the room where I'm currently standing. This has ramifications for hospitals. There's ramifications for memorial halls and things like that. And so there are a lot of important nafkaminas. If, let's say, the morgue of the hospital has a separate exit, which is or a separate wing where they keep the patients who have passed away, so then, generally speaking, we allow Kohanim to go into the other parts of the hospital. There are other qualifications that need to be met, but that's generally why we're lenient to allow Kohanim to go to the hospital. In any event, so the Gemara basically says, what if you have a room with kalim in that doorway? So the kalim will be tamei even if they're not part of the room, but since the corpse will eventually be brought through that door, the kalim are tamei. Now let's say you have 4 doors. You have a room that has 4 walls, and each wall has a door. So in that situation, you don't know which door the corpse will leave from. So l'chumra, we say the kalim underneath all the doorways are going to be tamei. Niftach echad mehen hu tamei v'kulan tahorim. However, if one door is open and all of the other doorways are closed, so then we say that that opening implies that the corpse will be transported through that doorway, and therefore the kelim underneath the other doorways are tahor, and only the kelim under the open doorway are tameh. Chashav lahotzio be'echad mehen o bechalon sheish bar arbal arba matzelas lakol apsachim kulan. And furthermore, if you have a mental designation or that you're going to be bringing the mace out of the northern door, then all of the other doors are saved by that mental designation. So the kelim under the other doors will be tahor. Beishamai omrim v'hu choshav lahotzio ad shelo yamos hameis. Beishamai qualify that, and they say, but that's only true provided that you thought about taking the mace out of the door before the mace actually died. But if your mental designation takes place after post-mortem, so then that's insufficient to protect the other kelim from being tameh. Beis Hillel omrim af mishiyamus hameis. And Beis Hillel say, no, even after the person has died, if you say, I'm going to take the mace out of the northern door, then all of the kelim on the other doors, underneath the other doorways, are protected from being tameh. So what does that imply? It says there's a retroactivity. Even though at the moment of his death, there were kelim underneath these doors, and you should say, well, Sof Tumalatse says that all of them, everything is tameh. Now that I've designated the northern door, then the kelim underneath the southern door retroactively do not fall under the rubric of Sof Tumalatses. So we see that Beis Hillel holds of retroactivity. Okay, so the Gemara says, you see that Beis Hillel holds of retroactivity, so why do you have to specifically designate the two birds that you plan to use? Say, I'll choose whatever birds I choose tomorrow, and retroactively those will be the birds that I was meichen before Yantiv. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute. Ha'itmar Allah, Amar Rabba lataras apsacha mikanu lahaba, v'chen Amar Rabbi Yoshu lataras apsacha mikanu lahaba ilam afrei alo. The Gemara says, but wait a minute, not so fast. According to Rabba, you've misinterpreted that Mishnah. The Mishnah which says that according to Beis Hillel, as long as, even if you've designated the northern door as the doorway for the decedent, that it saves the kelim underneath the southern door, that's not talking about retroactivity. That's only when the kelim are not there until after you make the formal designation. Once you've designated the northern door, then if you bring kelim under the southern door and place them there, those kelim don't become tameh. But Beis Hillel was not saying that retroactively kelim that were there before you made the designation are now retroactively not tameh. So that Mishnah is not talking about retroactivity. And if anything, you see just the opposite, that Beis Hillel does not hold of breira. But Rava Amar la'olam lemafreya. Rava says, I disagree. I hold that Mishnah is talking about breira, is talking about retroactive kelim, that the kelim were there even before I made my designation for the northern doorway. Those kelim will not be tameh. But why do you need to formally designate the birds that you're going to use before Yantiv? The answer is because we're worried that if I don't require you to formally designate which birds you're going to take, we're worried once you go over and pick them up, you're going to say, I don't like this bird. And then you're going to put it down. It's too skinny. It doesn't have enough meat on it. You'll put it down. You'll pick up another bird. Too skinny. Put it down. You may end up picking up a whole bunch of birds that you're not going to end up using for Yantif, and therefore it turns out it's a tiltul shelo l'tzorech. It's an unnecessary tiltul of a bird that's not being used on Yantif. Frek the Gemara v'ha'amart ba'omed va'omer zevazani no til sagya. But the Gemara says, well, if you're worried the guy's going to reject the bird once he picks it up, but Beis Hillel holds that you can just do a verbal designation. You don't need to pick it up. So why shouldn't you be worried that he's going to verbally designate it and then he's going to reject it later? So the Gemara says, Hani mile me erev yom tov. Aval biyom tov aser desinim demishtachchi shemenim kuchushim ukuchushim shemenim v'komatal tamidi de lo chazile. So the Gemara says, no, it's only if you do it erev yom tov, then we say that a verbal commitment is sufficient. Like Rashi explains, when you know that before yom tov you prepared them, then you're not going to change your mind. You're going to say, listen, I've already committed myself to those birds. But if it's only on Yantif and you didn't make any verbal designation before, you're going to start playing games. You may start fiddling around, be a little finicky, and therefore you're going to end up picking up birds that you're never going to end up using. Okay. So inami zimnin de mishtachri kulu kechushim v'shavek lu vasil nu misimchas yantiv. Another explanation could be as to why Beis Hillel requires specific verbal designation is because even though Beis Hillel hold of Breira, but we're worried that if you don't specify which birds you're going to use, maybe tomorrow morning on Yantif you'll come and you'll go over to each and every bird of the coop and all 20 of them will look too skinny for you. Not enough meat on them, and you'll end up not shechting anything. So therefore, Beis Hillel tell you, listen, verify before Yantif which birds you're going to use. And that way you'll know you'll have nice meat, fresh meat on Yantif, and you won't start playing games.
You always have to think ahead of time.
You got to prepare ahead of time.
That's what I teach you.
Very important. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Zimein shcharim umatza levanim, levanim umatza shchairim, shnai umatza shlosha asurim. Okay, in all of these cases, if let's say you prepared before Yantif, you prepared black birds in your dove coop, and the next morning you come in and you find, hey, these birds are white. Or you prepared white birds from before the Yantif, hey, these birds are black. So obviously these are not the same birds that you prepared the day before, and therefore they're muksa, you can't use them. Similarly, if you had prepared 2 birds, and then the next day you come to the dove coop and you find 3 birds, at least one of these birds ain't the one that you prepared.
Flew the coop.
No, it didn't fly the coop. Adarabba, one of the birds came in from the outside, and that's why they're muksa. We're going to see flew the coop in just a minute. Shlosha matzah shnayim mutarim. If, however, the day before you prepared 3 birds, and the next day you come in and you find 2, so we assume that only one of the birds that you had set aside flew the coop, and the remaining 2 are the same birds that you had originally and are not 2 new birds. Okay? Now, you could make an argument that birds of a feather, right, flock together, and therefore maybe the 3 birds that I had set aside all flew the coop, and these are totally two new birds. But the Mishnah says you don't have to worry about that. If you had previously, before Yantif, designated birds and they were inside that vestibule, that dove coop, and you come back the next day and they're actually outside in front of the dove coop, so they're going to be usher. Why? Because we assume that these are not the birds that I prepared. The birds that I prepared flew the coop, and these are 2 birds that came from the outside. However, if they're the only birds in the whole vicinity, and there are no other birds that could have come from the outside, so then we're makel, then we allow you to be lenient. So the Gemara now says pshita. So first the Gemara's question is, I don't understand why the Mishnah had to tell me a case of where I set aside white birds before Yantif and I find black birds the next day. Obviously these are not the same birds. Why would you think any other way? So Amar Rabba, right, a bird doesn't change its colors overnight. So the Gemara says, Hacha b'mayaskina kigon shezimein shcharim ulevanim, v'hishkim umatzu shcharim b'makom levanim ulevanim b'makom shcharim. The answer is, says the Gemara, here's what happened. You had 2 vestibules next to each other. In the right side there were white birds, in the left side there were black birds. And that's the way you had prepared them. Comes Yantif morning, you come back and you see the black birds are in the right vestibule, and the white birds are in the left vestibule. They switched around. So mahu detei mahani inu ninu v'hisapuche hisapoch kamash malan hanach azdu la'alma v'hani achrinu ninu. So you might have thought that the birds just switched places. That's what I would think, because I don't know anything about birds. But the Tan of the Mishnah is going to tell me that's not a fair assumption. You have to be choishesh, you at least have to suspect that the birds that were in the coop flew the coop, and these are 4 totally new birds that came from the outside. None of them were prepared, because otherwise, why birds don't switch places like that? So they must have been chased out by other birds, and these are 4 totally new birds. So Lema Misayeh Leila Rabbi Chanina, Dama Rabbi Chanina Rov V'Korov Heilachachar Harov. Let us suggest that this is a support for Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina speaks in an abstract case, but which can be applied to our situation. Rabbi Chanina says, if you have a unit right in front of you, and you need to ascertain where did it come from, you can say that it came from a proximal source, or you can say that it came from a source where there is an abundance of that unit that's further away. Which is the more compelling argument? Do you go after karov? Do you say that it came from a more proximal source? Or do you say that it came from a source where there's an abundance of that type of item that is found? Rabbi Chanina says you're heilachachar arov, you have to go basar rov. And therefore, since in the Velt there is an abundance of birds, and you find these birds, and clearly these birds, you don't know where they came from, you have to assume that they came from the outside, from the Welt, and not assume that they just switched places, even though the switching of places is a more proximal source. And so you see that we go like Rabbi Chanina, because we're chayshish that they came from a faraway place. So the Gemara says no. Kida Amar Abaye bedaf, hachanami bedaf. Abaye, not necessarily so, because Abaye taught us that the dove coops that we're talking about in our Mishnah, they each have a little ledge in front of the dove coop, sort of like a patio, like you and I would have. So birds have patios for their dove vestibules, for their dove coops. Now what happens is many times, birds from the outside come and they perch on the patio, on this plank that's outside the dove coop. They're not going to come inside the vestibule because the bird that's inside is going to become belligerent and going to chase it away. But they want a place to rest. They want to flock together with other birds. So they'll come and perch right outside. Now once that bird perches and rests right on the plank that's outside, it now becomes a proximal bird. It's not just coming from a rove, it's coming from a karov also. So therefore the Gemara suggests that you have two karovs. It's a karov versus a karov. You have karov birds that come from the Welt, and you have karov birds that I had prepared from before Yantiv. I just don't know which karov it is. Is it the proximal bird that's from the coop next door, or is it the proximal bird that came from the Welt that came to perch and rest on the outside plank? And that's the issue over here. And since I don't know which one it is, I have to be machmir. But you can't prove like Rabbi Chanina that rov and karov, you go bus or rov. Let's go weiter. Shnayim matzu shlosha asurim. You set aside two birds, and the next morning you come and you find three. So the Gemara just speaks it out. Manafshach. No matter how you look at it, you got problems because the achrinininu achrinininu, v'lo achrinininu ha'ikachad dema'ariv behu. These are either two totally new birds because all three flew the coop, or only one of the birds that I set aside. Or one bird. These are the original two birds, and another bird came from the outside, and accompanied them. So either the two birds that I set aside yesterday left completely, and these are three new birds, or one bird joined them. But either way, I can't use any of the birds because I don't know which one is which. But if I set aside three and I found two, the remaining two are permitted. My time. The reason is because I assume that these are the original birds, and just one of them flew the coop, and the other two remained behind. So Leima Masnis and Rabbi Velo Rabbanan. So let us suggest that this is a machlokas tanoim, and our Mishnah goes like Rabbi and not the Chachamim. Detanya Heniach Mana Umatza Masayim Chulun Umayser Sheni Murav and Zebazet Divrei Rabbi v'Chachamim Omrim Akol Chulun. So in order to understand this case, we have to appreciate that we're coming right up to Yantiv. And what did I do on Yantiv? I went and made a pilgrimage to Yerushalayim. What did I bring with me? I brought my Meiser Sheni money, the money that I had redeemed from produce that I have to bring up to Yerushalayim and consume in Yerushalayim. I have a special drawer in my house where I keep my Meiser Sheni money. I keep my bags of Meiser Sheni money, or bag of Meiser Sheni money in that drawer. Now, what happens if I had $100 that I had put in that drawer? Lo and behold, I open up the drawer right before Yantif and I see there's $200.
Miracle.
It's a miracle. Yeah, what happened? What happened? So, Rabbi says, you have to assume that someone, either yourself when you were sleeping or someone else, came along and put $100 of chulin in that drawer, and now you've got Meiser Sheni money mixed in with chulin money. How do you rectify it? You take $100 of it and say, if this is my Meiser Sheni money, well and good. If this is chulin, then it should be, the kedusha of the Meiser Sheni money should be transferred onto this. But that's the point that Rabbi is saying, is that you have to treat $100 of it as Meiser Sheni money. But the Chachamim disagree. The Chachamim say, no one does that. People do not store chulin together with Meiser Sheni money. It's just irresponsible. And therefore, if you find $200 of cash in that drawer, all of it is chulin, and the Meiser Sheni money must be somewhere else. Now, hiniach masayim umatsamane mana munach umana motel divrei. But here's the next case. What if I put $200 of Meiser Sheni money in that drawer, and then when I'm about to go to Yerushalayim, I only discover there's $100? Mendel, it's another miracle. Mm-hmm. How come you didn't say it's a miracle in this case? Because that's what usually happens, right? So V'chachamim omrim hakol chulin. So Rebbe says, we assume that this is the remaining $100 is Meiser Sheni, and another $100 was taken away somewhere. And the Chachamim say no, this is all Chulin money, because no one's going to just take part of the Meiser Sheni money. You're either going to take all of it to Yerushalayim, or you're going to leave all of it. So what must have happened was the $200 of Meiser Sheni money must have been removed, and this is $100 worth of Chulin. So what do you see according to the Chachamim? When I had originally designated 3, and I come the next morning and I find 2, according to the Chachamim, it's 2 totally new birds, just like it's totally new money. I put aside $200 of Meiser Sheni money. I come back and I find 100. So this is all new money according to the Chachamim. So why should it be mutter according to the Chachamim? So the Gemara says afilu tema Rabbana. No, you could say that our Mishnah is like the Chachamim. Ha'itmar Allah Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Elazar Damri to Ravayu Shiny Gozlos Hol of Asuyin L'Dados. That there's a fundamental difference between birds and money. Money is inanimate, and birds are animate. Animate birds will tend to have a mind of their own and go wherever they need to go. Whereas when it comes to when it comes to money, you need human intervention in order to move the money, and based on human nature, that's why the Chachamim say that this money is chulin. It didn't walk off on its own. So the Gemara says, "V'lama lishinuya yala shani goes lo solavasun l'dados." So the Gemara says, I don't understand why Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan had to come up with that answer. Why, when they're trying to explain the difference, why did they have to come up with that answer that birds are fundamentally different from money? The ha'itmar Allah de'ahida Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, the very same Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar had the following disagreement. Chad omer b'shnei kisin machlokas aval b'kis echad divrei hakol chulin, v'chad omer b'kis echad machlokas aval b'shnei kisin divrei hakol manamunach u'manamutal. Because there was a debate as to what the machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim is about. Are we talking about 2 bags of money, each bag having $100 in it? In the case where I put in 200 and I come back and I find only $100. So how did I store the $200? So one Mando Amar says they were stored in 2 separate bags of 100 each, and I come back the next day and there's only 1 bag of 100. And that's where there's a machlokes, where Rebbe says we assume that the 1 bag is the original bag, and we assume that therefore it's Meiser Sheni, and the Chachamim say no, the 2 bags went together, and the remaining bag is chulin. Aval b'kis echad divrei hakol chulin. But if all 200 was in 1 bag, and I come back and I see that there's 1 bag, but it only has $100, even Rebbe agrees that money is chulin money because no one's going to take out a portion of coins out of 1 bag. The Chad Omer b'kis echad machlokas aval b'shnei kisim divrei hakol manamunach u'manamutal. And the other Mando Omer had said that no, the only time there's a machlokas between Rebbe and the Chachamim is when all the money is in 1 bag, and that's where Rebbe says that, of course, what's remaining is Meiser Sheni money, and the Chachamim say no one's going to take only part of the Meiser Sheni money and leave the other part. It's all chulin. But when there's 2 bags, everyone agrees, even the Chachamim agree, that the original money is still here. The 1 bag is here and the other bag is left. So if that's the case, let's see. The Gemara is going to speak it out. Bishlam l'mandar b'shnei kisin machlokes hanodid tzrich l'shinui hachash and goes also vasun l'dados. Now 2 birds are like 2 bags of money. They're 2 separate units, right? So if you tell me that the machlokes between Rebbe and the Chachamim is with 2 bags of money, so then it makes sense why you have to make this distinction between bags of money and birds, because they're exactly the same case. And if the halach is different, whereas by the bags of money, the Chachamim say it's totally new money, and over here we're saying that it's the original bird, then clearly we have to distinguish between the 2 and say that birds are fundamentally different from bags of money, because birds walk around on their own. But if you're going to tell me that the machlokes is only when there's 1 bag of money, but when there's 2 bags of money, even the Chachamim agree that we assume that it's the same Meiser Sheni money because just 1 bag left and 1 bag is remaining. So that's analogous to the birds. So even without this distinction that birds travel because they're animated, then you should still, they're exactly the same case. The Chachamim agree to a situation where there are two separate bags of money that we assume that the bag that's remaining is the original bag. So too, if there's one bird remaining, or if there's two birds remaining from the original three, we assume that it's the original bird. So what's the problem? Amar Rav Ashi, hacha begozlos mikusharim v'kisa mikusharim askinon. Rav Ashi says, boy, this is a really complicated ukimta. Rav Ashi says that guess what? When that Mando Amar said, whether it was Rabbi Elazar or Rabbi Yochanan said, that the machlokes is only when there's one kiss, one bag of money, he didn't literally mean one bag of money. He meant two bags of money that are tied together. And when you have two bags of money that are tied together, that's why it's called one bag, right? Because they're connected. And that's where, when you have one bag, we had said that the Chachamim still hold that you have to be chosh, that you have to assume that this, you can assume that it's all chulin that is remaining, that it's not the original money. And with birds, if the birds are tied together, that's why it's analogous, because we're talking about where they would take three birds and they would tie their legs together. And that's where our Mishnah says that even though the birds were originally all tied together, we assume that one flew the coop and the other two are remaining, even though they originally tied together. And that's why they're analogous to a case of one bag, because one bag really means two bags tied together. So the Gemara says, and gozalos menaschi adadi kisla menaschi adadi. And that's the reason why the Chachamim say that there's a nafkamina between the two. When it comes to two bags that are connected to each other, so since the two bags are inanimate, there must have been human intervention over here. And if there was human intervention, then the money that was taken away in totality, and it was replaced by chulin money. But with birds have a mind of their own, they're animated, and therefore it's possible for one bird to have broken free, and when he broke free, right, he flew the coop, and these two are the birds that are remaining. But Rabbi Omer Lacha Kisanami Zimnin Demisachel Kitrayu. And Rabbi will tell you no, that even in the case of money bags, just because the two bags were tied together doesn't mean that we assume that that both bags of money traveled away with each other. The fact of the matter is that sometimes the string that ties two bags together can sometimes deteriorate and rot away, and therefore it's possible for the two bags to have become separated even though they were originally tied together. And therefore, according to Rebbe, you have to be choshesh at least, that if you only find one bag remaining, that bag is from the original Meiser Sheni money. Whereas, and with the same thing with the birds, we're allowed to assume, like Rebbe says over here, and we're saying this is L'divrei Hakol, that the original two birds are the two of the original birds that I designated are the birds that are here in front of me. We will continue Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.